Hey, it's Ray here in the UK, and it's Saturday, and it's grey. I'm here coming to you for another big share that I really wanted to kind of bring to the table. It is Saturday, so, slap me on the face for bringing up the idea of work. However, when, you get weekends where you have a little bit more time to kind of pause for thought and have a little reflection, I'm not really keen on a lot of news items that come out there, and particularly buzzwords and keywords, and particularly all the drama and the crap that comes through. I find a lot of it very, very toxic and very, very negative. However, there's a lot of good things going on out there, and if you kind of get into the you unpeel the layers, there's plenty out there that's worth looking into. And of course, because of a lot of the crap that is going on, it does in fact have a knock-on effect or impact on the rest of us who basically are trying to avoid it or trying to do other things and be alternative or more real in our lives. Not getting sucked into the 10 o'clock blues. Just looking around at what's going on in the world, there seems a bit of a perpetuation of this problem, is that if you pump a lot of this negativity, what do you think is going to come out? Well, more negativity. And I think all the kind of the guerrilla wars and all the uprisings and all the senseless killings and the political prisoners that have taken themselves to stand up and say, hey, look, enough is enough, we need change, and all these types of things. There's a reason these things are going on, because there is an understanding and there's a sense and there's a feeling that things in fact do need to change. And if there's anybody who was seriously affected, and even those who weren't, really need to kind of step up and say, hey, wait a minute, what happened in that recession was not okay. The fact is that they over-leveraged everything, they overdid it, and I say they, and I say because there are some seriously smart people out there, but I think they basically lost sight of the ball, and they just ran amok. I mean, greed took over, laziness took over because nobody regulated and kept it in check, and we allowed it. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and just point fingers to them, because obviously they're the ones doing it and they need to be held accountable, and all those people. I mean, if I did, if I embezzled piles of money, or if I went out there and took a whole pile of somebody else's money and went and did something else with it, I mean, there's only very few people out there who've been thrown in jail for Ponzi schemes. But to me, this is like the ultimate Ponzi scheme. And then now everybody's financial plan is, can I win the lottery? And that's the Ponzi schemes of Ponzi schemes. But if you look at these pyramid structures within corporations, you look into the whole dynamic of basically, I'm obviously I'm more green and wishing that we had, cleaner fuels and alternative energies in our vehicles. I've bought into the whole notion, which I do have some regret, but I do look for alternatives and ways to change that, of having a vehicle so I can, transport my family around, family of 5. Yep, I have too many kids in many respects, but, hey, they're my kids, it's my family, I love them dearly, and, I wouldn't give them up for the world. My point being is that having a conscious life and a conscious business where we're aware of what's going on and we're paying attention is essential. And many of us think that we are, because we're always having to cover the bills and pay for this, pay for that. But I mean, if you actually broke down what's going into your fuel tank, of all the actual cost of the item, which is overpriced to begin with, and then all the taxes and tariffs on top of that, and then basically is just passed on to us, the customer, and then the profit that's going on. I mean, you don't have to go very far in this country and in the States as well, even though energy costs there are far cheaper than they are in places like Europe, and particularly Northern Europe, where the energy cartels have really, really shafted the nations. And, you have a few people who fall on the sword and say, oh, I'll give up my bonus and whatever. But if you look at actually how much they make, no matter what, it's still, that level of imbalance and that lack of trust is still going to be there, because, it makes that person maybe particularly look good, or they're trying to do a PR stunt. But the reality of the situation is that they've overcooked the goose. And however, the goose is still flailing around going, frick that, because the fuel level poverty, the cost of living is too high, taxation is over and above, the lack of services that are going on. I mean, people are actually starting to say, God, the roads are looking more like it was in Thatcher days, and it wasn't so much that because Thatcher, whether you agree or disagree with her, was a particular problem with it. It's just a particular perspective of how to play the market and what to do with one's cash flow and how to leverage this and not leverage that and how to manage it and so on, as opposed to say, labor, the more left-wing side of it, where you provide more social service and so forth and so on. I mean, that's kind of irrelevant. The point is that actually we are all in this together. We all bleed red. We all breathe the same air. We need to take care of each other and ourselves. And that brings me down to the point of the living wage. It's a key point that I mean, it just boggles my mind that this conversation is coming up, that we actually can say, hey, there is a minimum wage, there's a legal requirement in place that people actually have to pay people what they're worth, or the value of which the levels they provide of service and that they provide. And then, for example, you have cleaning companies that are paying barely minimum and only doing so because they have to by law, but then they're also taking away this and taking away service, or taking away, if they have, if you happen to be in the food industry, you still have to pay a percentage for your meals, and yet you cook the damn thing. Or you put up with the abuse of a customer and you didn't get a tip, and you still have to pay for. I mean, I think there's so many things that are out of balance, yet that minimum wage is not keeping up with the level of inflation or the cost of living, in a sense. And that, who came up with that notion of the level of inflation? We look at economic models, and I'm not to appear naive here, but at the end of the day, yes, you have depreciation, you have appreciation, you have costs of doing things and so forth and so on, and each place and areas of the world is going to have different cost levels of different things. But at the end of the day, it's also about human cost and human capital and the knock-on effect. And if your quality of life is so diminished that you are unable to meet your basic living costs because some quack somewhere decided that, in fact, no, you're not worthy because you're a cleaner, or you're a parksman, or whatever it happens to be, I mean, that is not okay. It is a, there's a UN mandate, there's a charter out there that basically we are all entitled to basic human rights, and that is not to be on survival mode. It's to have, clean water, or security, health and well-being services, shelter from the cold or from the heat, basic human liberties of being able to have a say in all that. So much of that is the fact is that we're still, even though we have so-called developed countries, we think we have that, and there's all these laws to protect the laws about the laws, that we have the right to have a law, in fact, have taken away those civil liberties and those freedoms, and it has completely run amok. Whereas you go into some of these underdeveloped countries, I say quote unquote, where socially there's communities in there that very much within the culture are looking out for each other, who are helping each other out, despite the fact that maybe there isn't things that are available, and their quality of life is in fact better. They may not necessarily be able to vote, which is a kind of a political and a philosophical statement. That freedom is not being able to manage yourself and have your own choices. But at the other side of it is that people are not being just sold out for a mighty buck. It's quite interesting that is going. I'm being tapped into and listened to here in the car. It's quite funny. There's a wedding going on next door, so all the power to everybody. Long live the mighty relationship. But at the end of the day, it is about fairness, and it's about quality of life. It is about effectively just getting to be able to have the basics. And so on that note, I would love for this to continue. I'm going to take pause for the moment and just cause for reflection, because there's a question that comes to mind that basically is how I guess my questions is this. If you had a way to effectively make or generate an income or earn a living or generate cash flow that outperformed and outstripped and maneuvered so-called inflation, that basically this so-called living notion of a living workable wage, okay, that level of quality of living that you in fact deserve, entitled to. There's all kinds of philosophical discussions and political debates that come up about this whole notion of who's entitled. And I know culturally that's been indoctrinated. You look at untouchables in India, you look at servitude across Europe, or serfdom across Europe, I should say. You look at indentured servitude in cultural caste systems across Africa. You look at all these things that have been somehow kind of passed down over time and throughout history. But if you actually look at the reality of it, and you look at what is actually espoused through religion, through community discussion, that the notion of fairness is hardly ever in there. In fact, that's why you have these so-called laws are supposedly there to protect those freedoms, and yet they're not. And we can get into that discussion, which I don't want to do now, about whether or not the political process is effective, or whether or not we want to live in the so-called civilized, developed world of Europe and the States and Asia, or even Africa. I mean, I'm not saying they're uncivilized. I'm just saying this notion, this kind of false perception of development and underdevelopment. I mean, there's always going to be, a cause and effect. There's always going to be, there's a dynamic that's in play here, and as the natural world shows us, it's all about hitting the balancing where the scales and so on get tipped, where things either remain or are out of whack. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted because I'm here and there's a rugby match going on, there's a wedding happening nearby, and I'm sitting here, just sharing something here that I think is of value as well. But yes, it's effectively is that if you had a ways and means of living the life that you in fact envision for yourself, that you dream of, that you hoped for, that you want, and that you feel you deserve, would you take it? And if you would you take it now? Would you take action and make the decision to just go for it immediately and just make a quick decision? Because obviously, not obviously, but many of the people who, if you look at, who are successful in life, are able to take quick decisions. They don't get stuck in the over-analysis. They don't get stuck in the fear. They don't get stuck with it. Doesn't mean that they're foolish, because they just look at things slightly different, and obviously everybody has a different level of risk assessment. Everybody has a different kind of level of what those values are and what is important to them. But if I were to ask you, why is it that you want more money? Is it to have more money for the sake to have a pile of money that you can possibly sleep on? Or is it in fact, is it in fact to have or to enjoy or to experience those things that the money provides? Going on the holidays, paying for the house, building a new house, starting up a charity, going back to school, learning a new skill, sending your kids to a good school, homeschooling, being able to afford that, being able to afford the time to have a spiritual pursuit, because being able to go off and spend the time in solitude or an introspective state or meditative state is taking time out of where so-called would not be your productive time. But however, even though it adds value, it makes you more productive. There's the catch-22. But you need to be able to afford these things. So is it about having the money, or is it about having what money provides? And that is a question of questions of many that I'm here to share with you, that this whole notion of the living wage is going to be different for everybody, yet the governments and the powers that be feel that they can deem it so, as such that basically they have a number they've plucked out of the air, following along with basically what they think is what the cost of things are on the shelf, and whether or not they, what do they see as, maybe I don't eat bread, maybe I only eat, mueslis and fresh fruit and so on. Well, nowadays those things, particularly here, those are expensive. Maybe I juice a lot, or I have smoothie. Fruit's expensive. Maybe, I don't particularly want to have all the crap goods that come across the shelf or whatever. I want organic. Maybe I want alternatives to dairy. I don't want to eat all that. Costs, a pint of soya milk is, a third, if not 50% more than what a regular pint of milk would be. So, who's to say and to tell us what is an acceptable working living wage? But of course they have to come up with a standard. So they measure it, they do the metrics, they do the analysis, they come to us and they pass it and they say, well, okay, it's by law, this is how it is. Now, a living working wage is not by law, but it is by recommendation, because the code and the ethics are such that you need to, it's the right thing to do. And there are companies that sign up for it, and there are companies that don't. And one that comes to mind is that I know of a cleaning lady who supports 3 kids. She's single. She works 10-hour days, working in public building, cleaning up the offices of everybody else out there, making piles of money. She gets minimum wage, which means she's still being taxed, so she never gets to take that full whack home. So she having to work so many hours, working with a lot of chemicals and stuff that aren't particularly good for her, and the company says we can't raise anything because we wouldn't be able to afford it, yet posted a profit of over £18 million. I mean, that's a profit. Profit means that you've already covered your costs. So I don't know about you, but there's something out of whack in that. It just seems to me that even though we just went through the whole banking scam and scenario, basically as people as a whole in society, we've learned nothing. I mean, many of us, like here, maybe just talk a good line, but how do we take matters into your own hands? Empower yourself. And the best way to do that is to just not play by their rules. And I'm not saying run amok and anarchy and all that. I'm just saying, don't go out there and just, treat people like crap and whatever. I am saying find a better way of doing things. And the best way to do that is to empower yourself, to create your own economy, and to use what's already been proven that's out there. And incredibly, the internet is one avenue to take, which is one that I've kind of chosen to take because of its reach, its power, its capacity, its leverageability. But there are many, many, many more. And some of you, just because of the whole hopelessness and despair, or feeling trapped, or just not thinking big enough, or creatively enough, or tapping into a community of people who are like-minded, or just taking care of yourselves, health and well-being again, balance, mindset, tapping in and connecting with people who are doing those things, interviewing those people about how to do it, making friends, or going, being physically active and joining, parkside teams who play ultimate frisbee, or football, which is an international sport, or cricket, which is very, kind of the Commonwealth sport, or rugby, which is what's going on in front of me now. All these things that are ways and means to meet people. Some people go to the pub. There are many people, for religious reasons, don't go near pubs. Others do it for health or political reasons, don't go near pubs. There are others that have other hobbies and activities that enable them, or taking a class at the local college, to connect with people, build their communities. If your parents at the school, in the playground, go do stuff, activities. I mean, unfortunately, us men are notoriously terrible at that. But I encourage you to do it. Maybe you don't have to go pub hopping, but, get into, chess games, or do sports teams that, or have tournaments of backgammon, or whatever it is that gets me, get engaging in school activities for your kids. And if you don't have the time, find the time, make the time. Because I know, and I know it's easy to say many of these things, but if you imagine yourself thinking, okay, I really want to have the quality of life that I want for myself and for my kids and my family, to raise the quality of life for them. If someone were to ask you, or to point a gun at your head, or worse still, at a loved one's head, and say, if you don't do this within this period of time, we're going to take them, you somehow would do everything in your power to make it happen. Absolutely. So the resourcefulness is there. The question is the will, the drive, and the ambition. I think sometimes we get caught up in these kind of paralysis of the illusory nature of kind of the where we live, that we think we have to, because we're driven by fear, or we're pummeled down, or we're somehow convinced that there aren't any other ways to do it, and this is the only way to do it, and if we don't buy into this, then we're losers. That's bullshit, because you know what? If you, excuse my French, but it's true. Because if you look at the people who have made it, the people who had complete odds against, and you think about the people who maybe didn't have it and then somehow, or had it and then lost it. But, a lot of the people who have succeeded, a lot of them will say straight up first out, says, I'm not exceptional. I'm not anybody special. I just didn't quit. I just wouldn't settle for less. I just didn't lower the bar. I constantly raised my bar. I constantly kept going. I, developed myself, got engaged, got in gear, stepped up, showed up. And I know it's easy to say and it's harder to do, except when you decide and you commit that you will not settle for less, that you will not be denied, and you are passionate about it, and your desire just supersedes anything else, you will find a way. And I have found ways that work, and I found ways that don't work. And right now, the ways that I'm getting engaged in, particularly with an online business, to be my own boss, to employ myself effectively, to value myself, to pay myself first, to basically change my life, to empower myself, to live the life and the quality of life that I deserve, doesn't mean there's not going to be a period of time where I have to transition, that I'm going to have to transform, I'm going to have to rejig things, I'm going to have to learn things, I'm going to have to reorganize things, I'm going to have to upskill myself. Whatever that period of transition is, that's not my whole lifetime as long as I don't get stuck there. And that is what I'm here to say, is don't get stuck. Screw this notion that basically you have to be at minimum wage. Screw this notion that the so-called acceptable living wage is in line with inflation. Because we know these things can change with the drop of a hat, and it's usually at the decision and the whims of someone else who has far more than us, and then still rips us off when they lose it all. Look at the banksters and the taxman. I mean, if that wasn't a racket and a scam, who the... God, that gets me boiled up. Because why? Because the people who caused it and caused most of the misery and the problems, whatever, they didn't go. There was a few token kind of, people that were allowed to symbolically be, Lehman Brothers comes to mind. Obviously, some people at the top pissed the wrong people at the top, and so they were allowed to just basically run and hit the wall. But they were the scapegoats. There were still so many folks standing around at the pub, possibly going, drinking away and going, well, we got away with that. If you look around, not much has changed. The people at the bottom are still suffering. The people at the top. So empower us. I'm not saying I'm at the bottom. I'm saying I'm at the middle. I'm saying I'm where I am. And if you want something better, you too can get it. Do not settle. Do not sell out your dreams. Do not just do what the heck we're taught to do, because most of it is not designed for us. So design it for yourself. And that's all I'm trying to say here. Is please, for you, your family, your loved ones, your legacy, your future, the generations, the kids, so forth, is empower them by your example. Walk your talk, talk your walk, move on through, and challenge yourself. Are you hitting it? Are you doing your level best? Are you showing up? There are times when I know for a fact that I am not. And when I get the results that I don't like, that's feedback. That's telling me, step up. It's like pain. Whoop, don't do that. But at the same time, celebrate, feel good when you feel good and you've done something exceptional. Pat yourself on the back, take credit, be good to yourself, and build on that. So on that note, go out there and raise your own living wage, make it as you want, tap in, and if you really want to know more about how that can be possible, hit me up, click on the link below, email me, contact me. I'm available as much as I can within a daily life of what one must do, is connect. I love to connect with people of not only just like-minded, but even people who have new ideas or vision, or actually just actively engaged in life and doing their own thing. I mean, even if it's something I don't necessarily know or understand, or possibly even at one time ever even agreed with. But if it obviously seems to be adding value and serving those on you and yourself around you, who am I to say? Who am I to judge? I'm not here to judge. I'm here to connect. So on that note, make it a great day. My name is Ray, and it's Saturday, and I'm out of here. Have a great one. Cheers. Bye.